So when you see yourself looking at this chart, these rankings, what I see here are four completely different stories. On one side, we have a lone single champion, a man that goes by the nickname of Duck. Used to be known as Dynamite, and still is Dynamite, but does he still have that Dynamite in him? Who knows? The second side, next to that row, you have a past prime Bulgarian fighting for a title, keeping it alive, considering he knows he's not going to hold on it for long, but if there's a good payday for it, he might as well take the fight, considering he already achieved what he did, what most people in their 40s could not achieve. So he has nothing to lose. While the person on top is also almost past his prime, and that plays a different factor into this. But then you look at the third side. You see a German, a guy that beat out a somewhat of a person that was in his late 30s from Russian, and a guy that's not much in the rankings as he should have been, and he's out of it. He wins him, and then he takes on a Cuban fighter last year. And then last month he defeats a Chinese boxer that no one ever thought he was going to beat him the way we thought. And to be honest, does he have anything to show for other than a title shot? Who knows? And finally, you have the fourth section, the WBO. And this section right here is a lot more important than the other three, where you have a guy that deserved every single shot, with all promoters and people giving cherry pick fighters to big top contenders just to get rid of this Samoan / New Zealand fighter. But he just keeps coming and fighting more, and he doesn't stop. And when you witness someone defeating someone by a round 2 KO, whether if you think the fight was stopped early or not, the original fighter that still has that title, not the interim, but the major, Oleksandr Usyk. This right here solidifies history in the makings. Now, let me try to point this out. Now, guys, I talked about this before on my podcast, and I am trying to find videos of when I did talk about this. I did point this out that even if Usyk does retire, I did say this in other videos, that Usyk, I do believe he does have a couple more fights left in him, in my opinion. He might go 25-0 and then retire undefeated by 2026. Yet again, only God knows if that's going to make it possible or not. Like, I would like to see that. The thing is, you got to understand, pushing it doesn't mean that it's going to be unstoppable. And looking at this, I see a lot of things, because you have to understand, there's a lot of people in the rankings that deserve the title shot depending on what their resume was. Joseph Parker's resume could not be that much to talk about, because there's so much stuff we can talk about Joseph Parker's resume, more than Daniel Dubois, more than Tyson Fury, but not more than Oleksandr Usyk. Well, if you ignore the cruiserweight division of Oleksandr Usyk and just talk about his heavyweight, well, there might not be a lot to talk about, to be honest. But for Parker, it's a completely different story. So Joseph Parker's career might not be that perfect. 36 wins, 24 knockouts, 3 losses, and 1 by knockout. Now, his losses do pose a fact. Now, I do talk about this interestingly. When you look at Joseph Parker's career from start to finish, you can understand that there's more to this than meets the eye. Like, the start of his career talks about taking on trash opponents, nobodies, and then he comes out of nowhere and just takes on a past prime Francis Botha. Which, you look back at it, and I have seen that video, and it was sad to watch that fight. And then you just go on, and then he takes on other random people like Sharon Williams and Brian Minto, and just past prime fighters, almost like John McDermott and, well, a few other fighters that Tyson Fury took on in his prime, and people past their prime. But yeah, like when you look at Joseph Parker's career, his titles, his winnings here, and then he does have some interesting records here once in a while, but these aren't really big top fights. Yes, he was a multi-time champion this after his Kali Mahan, another guy that's past his prime. He fought for a WBO belt back in the days. But still, at least these titles made Joseph Parker top contender like. Even when he defeated out former title contender Carlos Tacome. And then after everything going on, he takes on Andy Ruiz. Two guys, both in their countries, that have never became champion in heavyweight. One guy would pull out an upset a few years later, and another guy in his country would make his country proud no matter what you say. And surprisingly, the New Zealand did it. He defeated out the Mexican, and it's one of the top 3 top fights that we should always talk about in his career. And even though his title defenses against this guy wasn't much to talk about, but of course, when he took on Tyson Fury's brother or cousin, Huggy, and defeated him, yeah, that was a big deal. Believe me, don't get me wrong. Even though his loss against Anthony Joshua was a bummer considering how the scores went, no one ever went 12 rounds the distance against AJ in his entire time from 2013 to 2017 during his pro career. So that was still an amazing feat that Joseph Parker can go the distance. And yes, months later, he lost against Dillian White, which was a close fight. But when you look at him getting down from 2nd to the 9th round, and did finish it with White in the last, yet again, close enough or not, he did need a lot more practice to make it back to the rankings. And even though 2018 wasn't much of a good year for him, still didn't stop him from coming back by the next decade and just take on undefeated fighter, and then squeak out, barely getting knocked out early by Derek Chisora, only to give him knockouts instead of the fight. But then, of course, Joe Joyce, well, information said that mostly Counterpunch Boxing, go subscribe to him, stated that Joseph Parker's toughest fight in his career was Joe Joyce. And it said that Joseph Parker was not ready for this fight. He wasn't in his good, stable condition, which is why he was in trouble in this fight. And after getting a left hook to the chin in the 11th round by Joe Joyce, yeah, getting knocked down the 4th time in your career was not that good. And losing by knockout in round 11, considering you lost 2 fights in 2018 by 12-round decisions, and both of these 3 losses were by British fighters, that poses a question. Now, don't get me wrong, Derek Chisora, and even he did defeat some other British fighters back in his day, just like Huggy Fury, and so not all defeats, but you get what I mean. And then he comes back in 2023, takes on just a little bit of a nobody fighters right here from Simone Keane and these Jack Messe. Yes, they were top good, okay contenders, but yet again, there weren't much to talk about saying, well, yet again, they didn't get good performances. But yet again, after Teddy Atlas and other people pointed out information and they thought that Deontay Wilder was winning, you viewers can tell that even after his Zhilei Zhang win, when he got knocked out twice and barely won the fight and takes on Bakali, you look at these 3 fights and you look at it, it's completely different. Now, guys, there is a YouTuber out there named mostly EGME Sports. I think that's his YouTube channel name. Pretty much, I think that's his name. I think. No. EMGM Sports. No. Yes. Go subscribe to EMGM Sports. He made a video a couple weeks ago talking about how Turki Al-Sheikh and Frank Warren, their strategies were to get rid of Joseph Parker because they didn't think that Joseph Parker was a liable fighter. Now, of course, if you want to watch that video, well, I do have links in the description so you can watch that video. And this was like a week before the WBO put out their report, or a few days before WBO reported the 30-day rule that they had to come up with a solution to put Joseph and Usyk in a fight. But yeah, when you look at this, I almost want to agree with him because, yes, because when you have Teddy Atlas and other people back in 2023 saying that Deontay Wilder was favored to beat Joseph Parker, or in 2024 when I favored and other people thought that Joey Zhang was going to put on an okay win against Parker, which he almost did. And then some people gave Martin Bacall, a guy that was out of shape, but they did thought that, to be honest, that Parker was going to give him, he was going to get, Parker was going to get in trouble with Bacall in the fight, even though I thought that fight was going to end a lot sooner, but not quickly. But yeah, when you look at all this, you viewers can tell that it seemed like that no one really wanted, or as promoters or so, like Frank Warren, it's like their idea was to get rid of Joseph Parker. So they fed to these fighters that they fed him with, and look at this, like 4 fights in Saudi Arabia with Simone Keane, yep, nothing much, just like Martin Bacall, nothing much, overweight fighters, and just like these 2 fighters, barely won. It just goes to show you that it seemed like they were trying to not give Joseph Parker the run for his money. Now, this isn't a GOAT podcast, guys, but you viewers can tell that Parker was in the mix of something, and it is possible that someone was giving Parker a hard time on purpose, but they were feeding him opponents just so they can let him lose, not realizing that he was going to win. Now, if that's not crazy talk, I don't know. It is a theory. It is a theory. So let's talk about Oleksandr Usyk one last time. So Oleksandr Usyk, a man that came out of nowhere, he boxed in his first debuts in his career and comes out with these record-breaking numbers here, taking on expectation fighters and just comes out of nowhere, defends out titles here or there, and then becomes cruiserweight. And this is interesting resume. Don't get me wrong, these undefeated fighters and ranks were legit. So he has taken on legit fighters. He's always had. Yes, people like this guy isn't much to talk about, but yeah, with mostly these guys, yeah, Anthony Joshua and so on. Yet again, you do look at it and you can already tell that something is wrong. Like, why do you have a bunch of British fighters fighting against Usyk for their titles? It does pose a questionable thought. But when you get to Daniel Dubois, here's a problem. Now, guys, here's a thing that some people don't know about Daniel Dubois. As the Dynamite, keep that in mind, not Duck, Dynamite, a guy with 22 wins, 21 knockouts, and 2 knockout losses out of 2 does pose an interesting fact when you look at his IBF championship. At 27 years old, don't be wrong. But when you look at how he has 21 knockouts, makes you wonder, does he have what it takes to go the distance? Well, he's gotten the distance once. Like, if we had to go back from his start, from his career and how he started, pardon me, I don't know why these friggin' ads keep popping up. I keep clicking out these ads and I don't know how to get rid of them. I'm sorry. But yeah, when you look at his ads and how he starts out with a bunch of first round, second round knockouts against some interesting resume fighters. And I thought this was a dangerous fighter, young kid being in his career. I really did. And then after going 3 to 5 rounds, and then he goes up against Kevin Johnson, former title contender, but now a journeyman at this moment. He goes 10 rounds the distance with him. This is the moment when you realize this is the farthest he would ever go in a full fight. And by 2019, he takes on guys like this guy. And badly enough, it just gets worse after that. But yet again, this is the thing. He does take on some undefeated fighters, and he does go 12-round fights against these people, but he's going early knockouts here. He even took out my favorite fighter that I was really upset that lost in 2019. And of course, yet again, he's just going first round, second round knockouts. But then when he's finally taken on a tough fighter like Joe Joyce for all the gold of these minor-weight belts, he barely goes 30 seconds in round 10. Not much of a person that can be involved other than having his eye sockets and his fractured left eye. Yeah, that does pose a fact. And yeah, seeing him not learning how to move his head and go 10, not even 10 rounds with Joyce. Yeah. And then in 2021, he takes on 2 nobodies against Bogdan Dino, which was for the WBA interim title that would bring him in the future of next year. another nobody for this first round. And then undefeated Trevor Bryan. That's it. WBA champion. What else can you say? 4 rounds. And then goes 3 rounds with Kevin Miranda, considering how I don't know why they didn't stop the fight. Yeah. Yeah, when I actually looked up who the referee was and I realized that this was a British referee, like reffing a fight in British while this is a African man. Yeah, I did question that. And even though the WBA did rule a 3 knockdown rule in each round means you can win the fight, yeah, 3 knockdowns in the first round and Dubois won 2 rounds later. Yeah, it just goes to show you that British people really want to protect their top fighters. Yeah, stinks. And then guess what? We have this. This person comes out of nowhere. He throws out a somewhat of a legal body punch, controversial low blow, and well, Usyk still comes back, and a few rounds later he wins. So Dubois has to go back to the start of day one, squeak out Jarrell Miller with only a few seconds left of a 10-round fight, and then he just goes 8 rounds, TKO Hrgovic, 5 rounds for Joshua. So yeah, my point is Dubois isn't really into going 12-round distances. So it's like my point is if you have a rematch with him and Usyk for a second time, the odds of Usyk wearing down Dubois again, even if they fight next year in 2026, if Dubois has enough to keep his title, then technically there's just no way Dubois could handle it. Now, of course, Dubois, the odds of him maybe going 12 rounds if this was a 12-round fight for Jarrell Miller, if he would have been a chance because Miller was getting dominated and these friggin' ads on the computer, and my computer's frozen. Okay, that's good. Sorry. But yeah, when you look at all of this stuff, jeez, I hate the ads. When you look at all this stuff happening, I look at this like guys, Daniel Dubois does not know how to go the distance. Like, look, in 24 professional fights, he's only had 95 rounds competed in 24 fights. That's not good if you're trying to be in a title for undisputed if you barely have even made 100 title fights in 24 professional fights. Like, for instance, let's go back to Oleksandr Usyk. For 23 professional fights, he had to earn his mark of going 201 rounds. And when you guys look at his resume, look how many first-round knockouts he's had. Yeah, pretty much 0. And that's for second-round knockouts, also 0. Third-round knockouts, well, we have 1 there and 1 here. Those are the only 2-3 knockdowns that he's ever had in round 3. Well, so I do enjoy seeing that because it's almost like Usyk does know how to take care of competition in longer distances. And of course, when you look up Joseph Parker one more time, we all have to understand, like I said, 2 rounds distance. Like I said, he goes out 3 rounds, 1 round against Fago Apello. And of course, well, yeah, like these other random fights with Alexander Flores, he goes 3 rounds against him. And of course, 3 rounds, 4 rounds. Yeah, can't say much about these fights. But early in his career, just like Francis Botha, because like these early fights against nobody fights. Now, of course, do these fights early in his career pose an effect for what he's doing today? No, not really. It's just my point is, like, even though Joseph Parker can go on early stoppages in these fights, just like with these title fights, doesn't mean that he can still do an okay job against Oleksandr Usyk. And if he can get him early in the fight, who knows how Oleksandr Usyk is going to try to recover from that. And my computer is paused again. Okay. But yeah, pretty much. And like this, 39 fights, 252 fight rounds. Well, consider he did fought a lot of 12-round fights and other stuff, but yet again, I don't think there's nothing much of effect. By the way, did you know that Joseph Parker and Oleksandr Usyk were both born in January? So Parker was born in 92 and Usyk was born in 1987. So they're both 5 years apart. I don't know if that would pose effect considering he's 6'4" and the 76 reach advantage, depending on who you ask. But while Oleksandr Usyk, yeah, 6'3", but 78 reach advantage. And he's southpaw. Considering that, you can't say that there's nothing to be said that Oleksandr Usyk can start ducking this fight. Yet again, I'm not going to say that Usyk is a ducker. Now, let me explain this. Let me explain this in a way. So, when you look at this sheet one last time, let me answer you viewers this. Now, even though this isn't a podcast, this is just a short, just a video, just me talking about this. Let me just say this. When you look at this as it is, you have to understand there's two options for Usyk here. One, Usyk can do this. Usyk can go for the mandatory WBO title, fight for Parker, and wait for Dubois. Or he'll give up the WBO belt for now and fight for the IBF belt and then fight for it later. Let me explain. Let me explain to you viewers the two facts about this. Now, Oleksandr Usyk is not a duck. And there's a lot of people online that are already throwing out random stuff already. And the problem is the WBO already reported this update 8 days ago, and there's a bunch of titles and thumbnails out there saying, oh, Usyk's announcing this. Oh, Usyk's announcing he'll fight Dubois. Oh, Usyk is saying that like he is going to fight Parker. Oh, he's a duck. Oh, Parker's... You look back at it, it's just thumbnails and titles and video. They're just titles and thumbnails. We don't know what's the truth and what's not because the internet media is just that ridiculous. So here's my two thoughts that you viewers have to understand. Usyk is not duck because he has the right to fight for a champion. He has nothing left to lose for this because at this moment, Usyk has the opportunity to become an undisputed championship in two types of origins depending on which is the good and which is the bad. So let me explain. The first option he can do, as I said, he can wait for the IBF to fight for Dubois later, so he can fight him later, just to fight for Parker to just retain out the WBO mandatory. Because at this moment, the WBA has already reported that they're going to give Oleksandr Usyk a 24-month extension, meaning they're not going to strip him of the title for over till 2027. Well, good luck for that because he might not keep the titles for long. Because he did say he has 2 fights left in him. And the WBC, well, they already had mandatory on rematch for Tyson Fury, so nothing much there. Pretty much. Yeah, and speaking about Tyson Fury is not even in any of these ranks, which is kind of funny why Tyson Fury is not ranked in any of this as we speak. Yeah, like even though he had his shot, his opportunity here. So the WBC is already gone. So the WBA and WBC are already out of this. So these two don't have anything to start stripping anyone of the title. So of course the WBO mandatory happened in September of 2021. So it's been like a good amount of over 3 years since then, so I guess it makes sense why they're gonna try to vacate this because it's been long enough. They just want another fighter to be involved, so I understand why they're gonna vacate Usyk for the title. But looking back at it, that can still play an interesting fact. But Usyk can win this fight. He can still have a job to take on Dan Dubois, depending on if they want the money, considering how Dubois has been involved with enough ducking already. Even if his illness was 100% true, why is he not coming out to the public, or no one's on his cell phone or his ringing flip phone not talking to the audience saying, I'm all right, I'm okay, I'm not missing? We don't know why Dan Dubois is not doing that. Just to give us a 15-second video saying, hey, I'm all right, but I'll be back. Don't worry, I promise. I'll take on Parker later, but Usyk, I'll fight you next before I finish Parker. This blah, 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 blah. Okay? Doesn't matter. You're just taking this time. Just wait if he gets clear or not. Even if his illness was real or not, we'll just let him wait and see what happens. Or Usyk can go the other direction. He can vacate his WBO belt now and then fight for Daniel Dubois just to get Daniel Dubois out of the shadows and then fight against Usyk, only for Usyk to maybe win that fight, and then maybe by 2026, when Usyk is 39 years old, depending on if his body can age well, maybe Parker might have not a 50-50 chance of beating Parker in 2025, but maybe by 2026, he might have an 85% out of 15% chance of beating Usyk, which might be possible. Might depend on his age factor, because like I said before, Parker's 34 and Usyk's 39, and like I said before, boxers around 20 to 35 years old in the heavyweight do last a little bit of a factor on their age. So I think we have to understand that. But yet again, but here's the problem. That might not happen. Let me explain. Derek Chisora is number 2 in the rankings as we speak. So just to understand that. And Otto Wallin was already involved in a boxing fight just a couple months ago. So Chisora already in his last 6 fights was already in a rematch loss with Parker, and then he comes out with a split decision rematch with Kubrat Pulev. And then of course after his loss against Tyson Fury in 2022, can't say much about that. So it seemed like his career was done. He barely squeaked out a win against Gerard Washington, considering how he had horrible cuts on his eye and everything else on the clash and everything else. And then a year later, barely almost a year, he defeats Joe Joyce by a close decision, which is crazy or not of how they, just crazy of how that fight ended. And then in February the 8th, he comes out of nowheres and defeats Otto Wallin in a 12-round fight for the eliminator for the IBF World Heavyweight title. Meaning that if Daniel Dubois does have to wait for Usyk, he can still try to protect his belt as he can take on Derek Chisora. Like, keep this in mind, guys. Like, keep this in mind. Yes, Derek Chisora has been having problems. He's been having injuries in a blood-out fight against Fury, and a little bit of I think of another fight with Pulev. So he has been having a lot of scars and tissues and bloodiness in all of these fights. And considering how he's barely pulled out fights and now he's back in the rankings, and with only 49 professional fights in his career, he did say he was going to retire soon enough until he's at 50 professional fights. And yes, his record's not that good, but you know what? If Daniel Dubois wants to keep his belt, he might as well fight for that guy just for the heck of it. I don't want to see another British versus British fighter, but a guy born in Zimbabwe, you know what? If a guy that was born in Zimbabwe, former in UK, hey, come on, let's give Derek Chisora one last title shot just to give him a send-off. And even if he does defeat Daniel Dubois for the IBF belt, even if Usyk does defeat Joseph Parker, that might play a huge factor. That's going to cause a huge factor of what might come depending on what we're looking ourselves into. So that might pose a huge factor. Just saying, a huge factor. However, let's just say that even though Turki Al-Sheikh did say that the fight that he wants for Usyk is him taking on Daniel Dubois in 2025. Keep this in mind, guys. We already had Conor Benn or Nigel Benn. I think I forgot one of those two. Conor Benn taking on Chris Eubank Jr., which was one fight that Turki Al-Sheikh wanted that fight to happen. He wants to have Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney rematch again, but after the Eubank thing, yeah, who knows what that's going to happen. But he did say that he wanted to have AJ versus Fury fight. And most importantly, he wants to have Dubois and Usyk. So if Turki Al-Sheikh does put more money on the table to just let him fight Parker instead of Dubois, that might give Usyk more of a bigger chance of him fighting. But if he still wants him to fight Dubois, because like I said, Usyk has been training more to just have this rematch with Dubois since their confrontation in December a few months ago. So you can add this up to whoever might fight the fight. So if he does fight Dubois, What does Joseph Parker have to do? Well, he might as well fight to become two-time champion, because just because that he's not going to fight Usyk doesn't mean that the WBO belt is still going to be vacant, and he can win back that title that he's lost for barely under 9 years since he last won that fight against Andy Ruiz. So who's he going to fight? Well, people do say that Anthony Joshua is on the mix for a rematch, but yet again, that still wouldn't make sense. And neither Derek Chisora, so why would we give him the fight? Heck, why would we even give this guy a chance to fight? Good luck if that guy does get a title shot, just saying. But yeah, like, even though Joey Zhang, well, if someone does get injured, or if like, okay, let me explain. Justice Hooney, not much of a record, but he has taken on some okay fighters, Kevin Lorana, and a guy from the cruiserweight. Not bad. Moses Atama still trying to pull out, trying to break Mike Tyson's record for being the youngest boxer. I don't see that happening, but to be honest, I might see him break Floyd Patterson's record next year of being the second youngest. That would still be a good accomplishment. Or even Muhammad Ali. Whoever actually breaks Muhammad Ali's record for being the youngest, I still say that's an achievement. So Moses Atama doesn't have to prove himself to be the youngest, because at this moment, being the youngest is a little bit too much of a push. I think he has to take it easy. But who knows, if Justice Hooney isn't available, or neither AJ, it might be him. But if one of these guys do suffer probably an illness, even though Fabio Wardley, well, they're saying that he's going to fight against Pulev, so good luck with that. So if someone does not decide to go for the fight, it might as well be Joey Zhang, because, hey, he might not there's no way he's going to turn down a title fight, even after his loss against Aga Kabayel, even though these are two guys that have been losing fights right now. So, yeah, they might as well fight for it. Like, Zhang has never fought for a title shot. Lawrence Okali, well, former cruiserweight and bridgerweight title. Who knows? Give him a chance to become a 3-weight class champion. That'll be interesting. That'll be interesting to watch, even though I don't love his style of boxing. But yeah, who knows? Like, so there's plenty of these interesting people on the list that Joseph Parker can become champion. The problem is, what's going to happen if any of these guys accidentally defeat Joseph Parker for the WBO belt while Usyk defeats Daniel Dubois a second time? That's going to pose a huge problem. So who else is Usyk going to fight in 2026 if that happens? Technically, that probably Aga Kabayel. Like, he's in interim mode already. So who knows? And for Kabayel, well, yeah, again, I mean Pulev, yeah, we don't know about that. So yeah, there's a lot of problems that can suffer around boxing here that we might not know, because anything can go wrong just like that. Like, Usyk has a couple options to fight for, because even if he fights one of these guys, the other guy still has to defend that title, and the other guy has to defend his interim to fight for the vacant belt against any of these top fighters. Just because if he was only prepared for Usyk and not these guys, he still has to be on his A game and not make a mistake. Just like what happened, that he wasn't in good condition when he took on Joe Joyce. Because, like I said before, like, if you heard what Counterpunch Boxing said, Joseph Parker said that Joe Joyce was his toughest fight of all time, and he wasn't even prepared for that fight as much than he should have. And to be honest, it just goes to show you that in boxing, if you're not in the best shape of your life, you might suffer the same way how he lost against Joe Joyce. So Usyk, at 38 years old, does have to make sure where his health is at when he enters the ring. So I think that's going to pose a fact of who's going to win. And depending if these guys have the body and the stamina and the guts and the heart to go in there to fight for this title. Depending if they are going to fight against Joe Joyce for the vacant title. Depending on. So there's a lot of options here that Usyk is. Because people are saying that Usyk has 2 more fights, and it might well be both Dubois and Parker. The thing is, even if Usyk takes on one of these two guys, the other guy still has to defend that title and fight for the vacant title against anyone. And what are the odds of them winning that title or defending it? So I think that's going to pose a huge problem here, because one full year until 2025. Because if Usyk does, let's just say he's going to he's going to retain his titles on June or something, or May, probably the end of June, or maybe the start of June, which I am expecting that, maybe July. You can already point out that who knows if he's even going to fight early. Is he even going to fight early in 2026 or later in 2026, depending if his age is at 39? Because keep this in mind, guys. Vladimir Klitschko retained his titles against Brian Jenkins when he was 39 years old. And he turned 39 years old 1 month ago after he defeated Brian Jenkins. Or Jennings. And then a full 6 or so months later, he lost against Fury before he was already around, probably a few months away from turning 40 when he lost the title. So Usyk at this moment is almost in the danger zone like Vladimir Klitschko. So we do have to pose a understanding here that something could go wrong depending on if you're in the physical shape of your life. So I don't think Usyk is a ducker. It's just there's just too many opportunities. Like, people want to see him try to just fight Parker, and we want to see that. And other people, just like Turki Al-Sheikh, wants to put out his fight with Usyk and Darren Dubois in 2025. The thing is Dubois going to fight 2 times this year? Is he only going to fight one fighter this year and then wait a full year? Because at this moment, waiting a few months is still a pain in the butt to wait for each fighter to even fight another fight next year. And to be honest, this stuff might not even come into play. Who knows what's going to happen? So I think my only last piece of advice about this, while, like, even though this isn't a podcast, this is just, well, I don't know what this is, other than it might not be much to talk about. But yeah, again, who knows, because I think my only consideration about this entire video is that Usyk has to understand what he's doing. And that's this. When you look at this chart, you see more than a few other boxers in boxing that could put out an upset victory. Now, who knows if any of these guys get a chance? Who knows if it's like, oh, if Darren Dubois is... Oh my God. Sorry. Who knows if Usyk does take on Joseph Parker, and then if he decides to fight for Darren Dubois for the IBF title, depending if they're going to vacate the belt away from Dubois or something like that, and then have one of these other guys just probably take over for Dubois to fight. Who knows? Yet again, do these guys, other fighters on the list of the top 25, even deserve to put out a title shot? Yet again, when you talk about guys like Nelson Heisa, yeah, good luck. Frank Sanchez, well, good luck if he recovers. Richard Torres Jr., he still needs more years of practice to be in the heavyweights of professional boxing. Just because he's a silver medalist doesn't mean nothing as yet. And even Joe Joyce and Filip Hrgovic, who knows if any of their careers can still survive, considering they already have a fight against each other. And as for Zhang, Pulev, and Bakali, these 3 guys, one guy's barely a champion. This guy suffered a huge disparity, and just like this guy, 2 guys from 2 countries that failed to put out title shots because the British promoters, the British people, screwed them, even if they didn't mean to. And as for Agit Kabayel, who knows where he's even going, depending if he's in the rankings or not. Yet again, guys, not only that, guys, I might as well want to see Daniel Dubois take on Agit Kabayel instead if he wants to defend for the title, even while Usyk is taking on Parker. Because who knows? If Cabello defeats Dubois and Usyk defeats Parker, who knows if we get to see these two guys for a fight for an IBF title. And if that's Usyk's last fight against Cabello for that right there could almost pose a huge interesting story there to see an amazing storytelling. But yet again, we just have to wait and see. Or maybe Lawrence O'Colly will come out of nowhere, even if Usyk takes on Dubois, and then they'll just have a match with whoever if they think who deserves the WBO belt. At the end of the day, we might as well wait and see. But yet again, who knows? All I like to say, guys, is thank you for watching this. The Fox Wolf is here, signing out. Goodbye, everybody.